Okay. Good morning. Welcome to Gresham-Barlow School District Board Policy Committee meeting, December 6th, 2024. In attendance, board members Chris Howitt and Kathy Keithley, staff Dr. Klinger and Mr. Cook, and staff Sarah Avery and Cindy. Thank you. We have several policies to go over this morning, and our agenda is on the website. But we are looking at policy EBB, DN, GCDA, GJAB, EBC, EBCA, and EBCB. So with that, I will turn it over to John and Tracy.
Thank you very much, Chair. The first policy up is we're bringing back the injury or illness reports. Given the information that we've got, I recommend we adopt policy. It's coming from statute, not from OSBA or ODE. The language is straightforward. I've run it by most everyone that would need to have eyes on. There, other than some of the nuances of required reporting that we talked about in the past, it is pretty straightforward.
So there's still the first paragraph that does have bracketed language. Are
Yes.
we recommending that we include that they're going to report self-administered first aid?
Yes, and clarify that with staff of the clarification I got is injuries that may lead to further care in the future. If you
Okay.
bump your head and then you have concussive symptoms later, things like that, where you just put ice on it, things should be reported and logged, and then we can move forward. If it's a
Okay.
Band-Aid, we don't need to tell staff that they need to do that.
Okay, unless it's a
Okay.
Band-Aid because half your thumb is hanging.
That would be a different kind of a Band-Aid,
Right,
yes.
right,
agreed.
okay.
So looking back at our notes from
Mhm.
our last meeting, it looked like we had gotten through all the language until the very last paragraph, where it starts to talk about reports to the board. And our
Uh-huh,
question was
that's true.
really about what is the information that's pertinent to the board, what can be shared, what's helpful in building understanding. So workers' comp claims, number of staff injury reports, like, it sounds like we had kind of gotten to that point
Thank
in
you.
talking about this.
The question was, what reporting or corrective measures are required by law? That was the question.
Yes. I didn't get back at anything like those things are required by law for the board.
And I think the reason we brought that up was to be specific, with only what we're required to do versus, because it was kind of confusing about the 24-hour thing.
but that.
That last paragraph, I think we were deciding between that last bracket, such reports will be submitted to the superintendent or the board.
Mhm.
For review annually, and then just what does that look like?
So let me tell you what we do, which may help, it'll bring some more clarity. We meet with our insurance company, Brown & Brown, quarterly to review injuries as well.
Mhm.
So anything that goes to the insurance company, we review, and what have we done to mitigate if there's a pattern?
Mhm.
We've actually done really well the past couple of years. Brown & Brown's been impressed. They've actually said we would like you to present to some other districts about what you're doing because you have fewer injuries.
Okay.
We could bring stuff like that forward. It's insurance company and make sure the superintendent sees
As
that
long
every
as
time.
it's not a separate report that, I mean, it's the
Mhm.
same thing, so it's not adding more work for you guys. That has to be done,
Mhm.
so it could be shared. What I would be interested in is just where there's trends.
Yeah.
And if there's trends, which you guys would be looking at, then what's the fix? I remember that over the years that we did review that. Usually they were higher level things.
Yeah.
But some of them ultimately involved different safety protocol in PE classes.
Yes.
Because they figured out there were some things that kids were getting hurt, and how could they minimize that?
Mhm.
So kids weren't getting hurt.
Right.
And so they changed some of the protocol, but it was in a reporting function to us, not the board saying, and you guys should do this.
An example in the past was pull-up bars.
Mm,
Believe it or not, kids were falling off, having tons of injuries. They took them out of the secondary schools about the mid-2000s because of that. That would be a pattern. Those were things that would be addressed.
And does anybody have to climb the rope anymore?
No,
Did the ropes
we don't
go
do
away?
rope climbing. Mhm. And that wasn't a pattern. That was just, no, we're
That
not
was
doing
just
rope
no,
climbing.
that was just no, yeah. But that would be kind of it, or where, as we've had, our buildings, I don't know if it is anything, we have, Gresham High School's 2-story now.
Mhm.
are there more injuries because kids are running up and down the stairs hurrying to get to class? I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't know if, I don't know.
And if those patterns were there, I
Yeah,
think that would be a reasonable report
Yeah.
and what we're doing. to
and so would
mitigate it.
that be something that would be part of this Brown and Brown?
Yes,
Okay, okay,
yes.
okay.
Mhm.
So that
So
would,
kind of a debrief, an annual debrief after.
Yep.
and that could be done at like
Brown
the August retreat kind of
Could be.
thing, you know, that could be just
Mhm.
part of an annual review.
Could be.
And just see where there are, and the other thing that I think shows up in the injury and illness part, I don't know if it gets to the level of the Brown and Brown,
Mhm.
is, in our, specific special ed classrooms,
Mhm.
where we do hear about
Yes.
injuries. And, not knowing if it's one injury that's being presented 3 times, or if it's 3 injuries. And so is that included in the Brown and Brown as
It
well?
is not, those usually don't result in medical care to where there's an insurance claim.
Okay, okay,
But those are things we expect them to document because it does show patterns of behavior.
right, and whether or not
Mhm.
additional aid is needed in there, whether or not it's a layout of the room,
Additional
whatever the
training.
additional training. So
Mhm.
could that just be wrapped into the same timeline of report, to just, and we get some of that already.
It could be, you're gonna get, I mean, we expect them to do it every time, so you're gonna get hundreds, because you have kids with disabilities and cognitive challenges. It may hit a staff member and you're gonna get bruises. You'll get a good number of those.
Isn't that what's our process
Yes.
internally for reviewing those to look for patterns that then maybe like we did our annual review, there were no patterns.
Yeah.
Therefore, carry on, or there was a pattern, this is.
Well, and I think where it comes up is, at different times of the year, we get it out in the board meeting. We get
The
the,
restraint and seclusion you get.
well, no, I
No.
mean, we get the public comment.
Oh, yeah, yes,
We
you
get the
You
public
do.
comment where there's,
do.
information that's presented to the board that we
Mhm.
don't have a context for that.
Mhm.
And, you know, whether or not it's one classroom that's continuing to have, support issues, whether or not
Mhm.
it's school-wide, whether or not it's student dependent. And so without getting into student confidentiality, things like that, but sort of parsing out that, um, that it's being known and addressed.
I think and I don't have a problem with presenting it. I think that being global, if you have students with severe cognitive challenges, they're
Mhm.
gonna hit all the way into high school, with just how they communicate.
Right, right,
So, even adding a staff member, whoever you add is going to get hit.
right.
So it doesn't mitigate the behavior.
No, but it explains it in
It does
context.
explain the behavior.
It puts it into context,
It
that
does.
it's not perhaps, if it's that kind of behavior in the gen ed classroom, well, then
That's different
we've
too.
got a different
Yes,
conversation.
that's different as well.
Okay,
So what you just described is, the trending, and Tracy, what you just said is that we will, internally review for trends. And
Yeah.
if there's a trend, it goes to the board. If there's no trends to report, then you report that there's no trends. That's the intent.
Yeah.
So if that is the intent and that's what we're codifying,
Mhm.
wouldn't we put that here? And it was just like my comment the other night, we sit here and say, here's the understanding. But we all are gone tomorrow and nobody remembers what the understanding is. So do we put it here? Just what we just said.
let's see. It kind of doesn't say
It
that.
kind of says it does. It really would.
Statistical reports, monthly and annual analysis. Those things by their nature would show trend, and they,
No, because we just, this says, these records will include measures taken, reporting, periodics, all of that.
right,
And those reports will be submitted to the board.
right,
That's all it says. Well, we don't want necessarily to see those. We only want to see when there's a trend.
Mhm.
When those reports indicate a trend
mhm,
that need to be evaluated, this says we're gonna get it. It doesn't say how often, because we've taken out annually. So I'm saying
Uh-huh.
we're narrowing the scope down of what will be reported. And do we say that?
so I think then I would back it up, because, again, you may look at it, Tracy, and say, there's not a trend. we hear public comment from 6 people and we're like, wait, that sounds like a trend, not realizing that it was just one incident. So it sounds like trend isn't the right word to use, but getting the report and having it, if it's given to us annually, which I think that needs to go back in again.
But if I look, so the types of injuries, so I think
Uh-huh.
there could be like, these are the 5 top injuries,
Mhm.
right? I'm thinking about a quick PowerPoint or document.
Right,
These are the top 5 injuries that were experienced by staff or students. Illnesses is a little bit, that would be more probably like there was a measles outbreak or something.
And then
that's
we do
managed
send
by
notice out,
MST.
if something happens, people see it, the community sees it, usually you all get that. as well.
But we could
Yeah.
quantify
Uh-huh.
that, right? Accidents in occurring, so if there were accidents, like someone lifting a car.
Mhm.
But then we could, I mean, you could then have that year after year, and it would still be high levels, there would still be some kind of report,
Mhm,
and then if there
mhm.
are, like. Hey, we're seeing this as a reoccurring thing that we need to address,
And
then.
that would be part of the presentation.
I guess my point is, um. This is, I mean, again, it's being recommended to take out the annual. And that if there's a nuance to this language,
Mhm.
more specific than what the language says.
Yeah,
Where do you note that? So you guys, we're talking about it, we come up to an understanding of how that's gonna be implemented. Where do you track that?
Well, do we
You
put
know.
it, I mean, that sentence was struck, it's that very first sentence of that paragraph. The records will include information and analysis of the data and trends.
Yeah, and again,
but I guess
I don't want it in there if it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
But if
Right.
it's not here, where is
Where
it?
is it?
I
Yeah.
feel like that gives staff enough guidance
I agree.
to put something together and present something, and then just like any of our presentations,
Mhm,
based on questions you all have about that,
mhm.
might lead us to adjust
Might.
something.
So without annual, when would you, how often
So
would
would
you
we
tell the
put,
board?
but what would
I
put
think
annual
it would
back
be-
in?
I think annual
Well,
needs to
it's
be
an
in there.
annual analysis, right? I mean, isn't it in there in the?
Oh,
grade?
you're right, that last clause,
Um,
but it doesn't say the presentation needs to be
annual.
annual.
Annual analysis. And so it just doesn't say that the report will be submitted to the board.
And I think we could put the report submitted to the board annually.
Mhm.
Yeah, and maybe that
Mhm.
feels redundant, but it just seems like you guys are looking at it. The requirement is for you guys to look at it. But also the board to see it.
Mhm.
I mean, Sarah, what you're saying is that annual analysis of accident data, they're saying that you should analyze the data annually, but it doesn't say how often. you
And those
report it.
reports, to me, I read it as monthly and annual analysis, such reports, i.e. those monthly annual analysis of those will be submitted to the superintendent. Are we
Yeah.
doing both superintendent and board? I mean, that's how I read it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but so is that monthly? They're gonna give it to us
No,
monthly?
because then we can put for review
Or
annually.
annually?
Yeah, because I don't want
No,
to see them.
but to
Yeah.
Sarah's point, just answering her
Yeah.
question right now. If you read it that way, then they're gonna report it to us monthly and annually, which doesn't, we don't wanna see it monthly.
Monthly's struck, right?
No,
No,
monthly's
it's
in the
there in the
gray.
gray.
It's in the
It's in
gray.
the gray.
It says that she's reading it as the types of injuries and illnesses and accidents occurring in the district and monthly and annual analysis of accident data. Those reports will be submitted to the
Yeah,
board.
That's
So
not
you
how I
could-
read the monthly annual.
I
read
don't
it more
either,
like
but-
Month by
Yeah.
month, January had this many, February had this
Yeah,
many.
yeah.
Right, but if somebody's reading it that way,
Yeah.
the only way to clarify that and be consistent and intentional is to put it back in annually.
So, but again, so such reports will be submitted, I would assume the superintendent is getting it. And the superintendent should be getting it more than annually.
And he designates my position to do this and then I report to him. So he's getting
So-
it, but we're doing
But
it
if they
quarterly.
are.
Yeah.
Quarterly, okay, so.
I would prefer to have quarterly.
Um,
Monthly is too
but-
often.
So such reports will be submitted to the
Agreed.
superintendent
yeah.
quarterly
Yeah, but
and annually to the board for review.
yeah.
Because again, it's timeliness for the superintendent versus
Mm-hmm.
reviewing data for the board.
Mhm.
And it puts it in here as.
Yeah.
As at least a reference point, and then it goes on our list of things that show up. That we need to have when we get this report, we get that report, we get the various reports through the year.
Mhm.
Does that work better?
Yeah,
It does.
if I were to write the sentence, such reports will be submitted to the superintendent quarterly and to the board annually, just to
Yep,
keep
yep.
context.
Yep. That works.
Yep.
Doable without being onerous. Okay,
Are we ready to move that to a work session?
yes,
Okay. We are back to disposal of district property. The two versions suggested by, do you want to review any background? Because we've got the two new versions suggested by OSBA.
Mhm.
Our version on the website is different, but has many of the same concepts in there. The question in the past for this group has been disposal of property has been intermingled with disposal of equipment.
Well, we haven't ever had
Yes,
property, and I
exactly.
think that was the word that was not
Mhm.
defined.
Yeah.
And,
Even when you look at our policy on the website, it'll say disposal of district property is a title, it's DN.
Yeah.
And the first sentence says the superintendent shall report to the board any equipment or material no longer suitable for school purposes. So you get it right in there now, based on our recent circumstances, there's a question, what does property mean? Just even based on the first sentence.
right,
And then the board, after reviewing the facts and determining that the equipment is no longer suitable, shall declare items surplus and shall authorize the superintendent to dispose of said equipment in accordance with state law. So, I mean, it gives us the latitude to go through the obsolete process, bring information to you as necessary. It doesn't really discuss real property. Like I reviewed at our last meeting from Spencer, who sent to me the verbiage from state law, and I'll bring that up here again. State law, where did my email go? There it is. No. I apologize, I had this at the forefront of my screen and it is.
does the statute refer to the surplus stuff as property, or is that been our word?
That's our word. The statute that he's citing about real property, doesn't, it's not even included in this. He said the board has a lot of latitude to dispose of real property. And section 5 from ORS 332-155 says, may lease, sell, or convey all property of the district as may not in the judgment of the district be required for school purposes. May sell property of the district in transactions whereby the district has the right to lease, occupy, or reacquire the property following the sale, or have facilities constructed on property or finished to the specifications of the district. The construction or furnishing of the facility shall be subject to a number of ORSs. Spencer believes that this gives the board a lot of latitude to be able to sell real property as you see fit.
Okay,
And in our last meeting, we said, can we add number 5 and 6 from that ORS to our policy? Or we could make a statement that's like, in regards to real estate. We will follow ORS, blah, 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 like reference it, or we can say it.
Did Spencer say anything about whether or not, and I don't know what the process is for this, adding a standalone policy for it? Because I'm just thinking down the road,
Mhm,
this
yep.
is just another tiny component. There are school districts that buy property for investment purposes
Mhm.
and then sell it.
Mhm.
And so again, it's not because it's, in that case, surplus, but it is what you were just reading from Spencer, that it
Mhm.
does not have a continuing forecasted use by the
Yes.
district.
He said things for the board to consider. He gave 2, so I'll read them out to you. Create different procedures for disposal of real property and other types of property. Most districts rarely dispose of real property, so it makes sense for more procedure in that regard. They don't have a template. Insert a dollar threshold with different procedures above and below that threshold. If the equipment is valued at this much or higher, the board must declare it surplus to dispose of it. If the property is less than the dollar amount, the business manager has the authority to dispose. So we could do something like that.
And so that's kind of bracketed in that version
Yes.
too.
Yeah. So but creating a different procedure within the policy, I think, and I think what it is if we're disposing, the sentence could be straightforward. If the board is proposing disposal of real property, we will follow ORS 352.
And it's.
Or
it is
332-155.
referenced
Mhm.
On our,
Does the ORS require us to surplus it before it is sold?
It does not.
And right now our policy says that we must.
Yes, and that's where that confusion of policy is. Are we talking about property or equipment?
I think that's why we have to say real estate.
Yes.
Yeah, so on this version 2, though, it doesn't. Um. Oh, declaring it, yeah, declaring it, and so
Mhm.
is there a better word to use?
I think it's all in the title.
Well, but version 2 now says it doesn't even imply real property.
No, none of it has,
Yeah.
none of it has, that's been the problem.
So how? Okay, go ahead.
I think part of the solving this would be changing of the title. And
Yes.
it would be addition of words, disposal of district property, comma, equipment, comma, and real property.
Um,
If we're keeping it all in. If we're keeping it all in the same. Then why do we have to denote that it includes everything? Because it includes all of our property.
Yeah.
Then there's no reason to denote it. If we're separating it, then
um,
we need to denote the separation.
so
Yeah.
what it is it's disposal of district assets.
Could be that.
That's a more encompassing word. The word property means something different to different people, as
Mhm.
we've run into.
Yeah.
With this whole thing.
And real property is on the asset list.
Yes. And I'll
So
verify.
It should be,
it's an
Okay.
asset,
It is
Yeah.
an asset, for
Yeah.
sure.
but it's
And-
not
It's not an asset that we necessarily insure.
insure and depreciate.
Right.
You only depreciate things that you're using. So
We did change it to assets, then we could make. A little standalone paragraph just about real estate. Because. the
it's
first
like a number
paragraph-
4, what you were saying,
Mhm.
because it would be the
So are
1,
we
2,
looking at
3, and then there would be a
using
separate paragraph and number
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
Because that would straighten it just a little bit,
Mhm.
and give more clarity that, and do you still want to have the value less than? And,
I think that's up to your discretion. I don't have an opinion either way on that.
so otherwise, what happens if we don't?
Yeah,
If we don't, so there's a bunch of Chromebooks that need to be sold. They have a value. And is it a
So this
single
is-
value of each item?
mhm.
I actually like our language better than version 2. Version 2 specifically calls out surplus. Our version says we're gonna follow the law. I think we say, shall authorize the superintendent dispose of said equipment in accordance with the law, which right now is a surplus
Okay,
process.
Wait, I don't see according to.
So I have version 2, version 1, and
Which-
then,
And she's looking on our current policy on the
Which is-
website.
Which is
that
this
is
one,
the one
okay,
That's
but
correct.
it doesn't,
So in the last sentence of the first paragraph,
oh, in accordance with state law. But again, if someone's trying to look at the policy,
and this just says equipment.
Mhm.
right, it still says equipment, it doesn't talk
that's
about
where
real.
this, so the.
We can change that.
The bottom is the one that has the real estate.
Right, but it doesn't say it anywhere in here.
Right, so
And
that's why I think we could just add its own little paragraph or its own little statement about real estate.
And some of the
Not use the
statement,
word surplus.
no, that whatever the statement that Spencer had, that it was no longer.
Yes, which is in, his statement was directly. Can't keep track of my screen.
But would you still change it to district asset?
I would change it to that. I think that's clear and it limits
And it-
interpretation.
Right, and then
And
it
I-
makes you read what the different,
I think that second paragraph could also possibly be the board authorizes the superintendent to dispose not of property, but of equipment or material.
yeah,
Yes,
Repeat that again, Tracy.
Just change property to equipment or material, which is how it's listed in the first paragraph.
So the sentence would read, the board authorizes the superintendent to dispose of equipment or material at 1,000 or less.
So we have what's existing there, change property to equipment and material,
Mhm.
and then add a
Paragraph about real
statement that's
property.
about real property.
So, adding the statement about policy or property, we get rid of the having the need to surplus it.
Yes,
And so
Mhm.
this policy goes into effect, and how does that affect the current issue that have on the table?
that I don't have an answer for. We're kind of doing it after the fact, but according to Spencer, he believed from the beginning we could sell that property.
Well, that first sentence says
Yeah.
we're gonna follow the law. It's referenced, 332.155
My
is
concern is
referenced
that
on this.
we are making a change to a policy that will affect a current situation in front of us, and that feels subverted and not very transparent.
The counter I would give you, although I see exactly where you want, the counter I would give you is it has highlighted some clarification needed in our policy. But our policy is always referenced ORS 332.155,
And,
which gives us a license to sell.
and there may not be, because again, back to what, and I wish I had that piece, whatever you're looking at, John, that
Hmm.
Spencer sent, because I don't have that to look at.
I can forward it to you.
So, because in that, didn't it say if the real estate no longer has value
Mhm.
to the district, not that it doesn't have value, it hasn't been devalued, didn't it say, then we would declare it as no longer necessary, but we didn't, weren't declaring it surplus, but we were saying that it no longer served our purposes.
I don't think, according to
What did he
ORS
say? Yeah.
332.155, you don't have to declare surplus at all. You
No,
can sell.
but I get where Kathy's saying, we
Mhm.
headed down that path.
Yeah, oh, I get you.
And now
I
we're
get
changing the policy to reflect state statute.
you. Mhm.
However, the people that have been asking us the questions may not look at it that way. So,
So we-
Two things to consider.
Mhm.
One is, at the time the decision was made, we had a policy,
Mhm.
and we have to do at least state law or more. We can't do less than.
Correct.
If it were not state law, we'd have to go back and correct it, but state law says this, our policy said this. At the time, we had a policy that we did not follow. And so what this will look, we didn't surplus it first, our policy
Nothing
said,
in our policy says we have to
The
surplus.
policy didn't say we had a surplus. That's where the confusion of equipment and property was.
And it references.
And it referenced the state law.
shall declare item surplus.
so are you suggesting that, when James came back and said we have to surplus it before it can be sold, because that was what the whole conversation was, are you saying that was inaccurate?
It might be. I don't know for sure. We need to involve Elliot again, but with Spencer sending me this information, I think we were following state law.
So that has to be,
Yeah, we have.
Very clear. Mhm.
and be clear, because
Yeah.
one of the things that I do recall
Mhm.
hearing is that we would be completely transparent and communicate with, everyone, and we still, at this juncture, don't know what the facts are.
Agreed. And here's my recommendation for this committee at this point. Given the situation that we're in, I don't think we should be adjusting this policy at all. I think we should be leaving it as is until we get through this. And then if an adjustment is needed based on when we get through this, that's reasonable. But to your point, I think it could be viewed by the community poorly.
So,
So we brought this policy to this committee after it was surfaced in a board meeting
Uh-huh.
to kind of dig
And
in.
I'm gonna go.
We dug in and gotten some clarification that our policy committee believes that we are following the law and did so in our actions. And now we just pause. Right?
yeah,
So where did the impression come that we had to surplus it? That will, it's not just,
well,
are we following state law? Was it here? What specific thing was looked at that gave obviously James or someone that impression? So, because that's what we need to address.
and I think that, again, we had, what's the definition of property? I think we also had a different interpretation of surplus. I think, in the conversation we'd had with Elliot, with the attorney, about the land was no longer necessary for us,
The word-
therefore it was
But,
not.
but so reading our current policy, the board, after reviewing the facts and determining that equipment is no longer suitable. And that's the confusion, is it says equipment shall declare items surplus.
Yeah,
So it does say we shall declare
if it's
The
equipment,
board.
yeah,
it, shall declare. And if this policy applies to property, and this term in the first sentence only says equipment, that would be confusing. But again, John, you just missed this. My point is, whatever the understanding was, I mean, so the question would be, whoever brought that forward and said that we needed to do this first, what were they looking at that would tell them that was required?
Yes, and I don't know what that is.
And the word surplus doesn't show up in the ORS at all.
No.
So that's a word we use.
what does it
And-
say? Sorry, I don't have it on.
The only other point that I wanted to clarify, because I had two to make, that is that it's just like when a law goes into effect, it's not generally retroactive.
Right,
It's for
Right.
future
yes,
consideration.
Yes.
And so that would be another point of clarification.
yes.
Because I
So-
would like to have it, here would be my moving forward part, understanding that we were operating under the best information that we had at the time. It was a very unusual circumstance.
Yeah.
We surplus computers every year. We do not surplus real property. We do not remove real property from our inventory.
Yeah.
And so that brought in we tried to fit it into a policy that it didn't quite fit. I would like to know what the policy should really say. And in part of that, we can say, when we started down the path of removing that property from our inventory, this was our understanding. After much review, moving forward, this will be the process, because we do still have other property in our inventory.
And I think process wise, take the sticky situation that we're out of. I think we followed process for this real property sale. You didn't need to declare it surplus. You didn't need to have a policy for it. The IRS supports what was done.
Mhm.
Kathy's point about somewhere there's confusion and somewhere somebody saw something that maybe countered that is really where our issue is.
Mhm.
And that confusion between real property and equipment.
And just, again, say that out loud to the public.
Yes,
There isn't any way we're gonna be able to do it that does not feel
right.
not very transparent, because we're gonna
100%
say,
agree.
oh gee,
Mhm,
we said that we were,
mhm.
and I wanna delineate, because you said we were following policy, well, that's the part.
Yes.
We're following law because it's less than, but
Mhm.
we have policies for a reason, so we thought it said this, but now it doesn't, so our bad, we're gonna go back. It's just,
And it says equipment.
I know,
It's the confusion with title and
Determining
equipment.
the equipment is no longer suitable, shall
Yeah.
declare item surplus.
Mhm.
it was made public that we didn't follow our policy, so so we either didn't follow it, and we need to, or we go and say, we read it wrong. We really were following it, or we
Yeah.
weren't not following it.
That's exactly the position
It's-
we're in. Mhm. That's why I think right now, I mean, we're looking at mediation, attorneys are involved.
There's connection to another policy.
I think we can bring this forward to our council. This is
Mhm.
what we see, and let the
Mhm.
council weigh in and give us their opinion. And then this is where we are.
And I don't know, it did reference the legal references that this falls under. We just didn't have any verbiage that incorporated that legal reference like we do in some policies. We don't
Yes.
do it in every single policy. We have the reference for what it is, but we
Mhm.
didn't include that again because there's a disposal of real property,
Yep. So,
real estate. It's called real estate.
and I don't know that, I mean, districts have sold property before, like you said, and they haven't run into this. I do think there is some confusion, but that paragraph 5 at the top of the sheet I gave you, which is from the ORS,
Mhm.
reference at the bottom of the policy, clearly gives the board the ability to sell property as needed.
Mhm.
So there's two other policies that have the word surplus in them in reference to property. Purchased property or surplus property owned by the district or school. So I say that just property used in a general term
Mhm.
is in multiple policies that we're going to need to probably clarify in this manner.
Okay,
So
and
one
whether or
is,
not we have the word, yeah, because it's assets.
I think, John, to your point about, you know, whether or not this is the best timing to try to resolve this. If we either try to resolve it, but, you know, make it for a future
Mhm.
situation and leave this one alone,
Mhm.
what benefit is there? If the reason why we were looking at it, well, let me ask you this then,
Mhm.
clarify.
Yeah.
When you wanted to clarify this, because clearly there's confusion,
Right.
was it your intent that it would be retroactive, that we clarify it and use it for this case?
No, I think the intent was that, a hole was pointed out, a challenge was pointed out, it needed to come to this group to be vetted. I know my intent was never to be go retro back and do this, it'd be to clarify moving forward.
And if that's the case, then, I mean, the conversation that we've had, I think, is valuable because it highlights the process that we
Yes.
need to do to make sure that we've got our bases covered, which is transparency,
Yes.
communication.
Mhm.
And if we're not gonna do that, then maybe the cost versus the benefit outweighs doing this now.
I think it does. It also, knowing the legal things that I deal with pretty regularly, it really can come across poorly that now you're trying to manipulate your system and policy to support what you did 6 months ago. And that won't be viewed well.
Yeah,
What will be viewed well, in my opinion, is having these open discussions.
So,
Here's where we are.
okay, um. So it's, okay, I just want. I'm just not sure. I would like for us moving forward to have a clean policy.
Mhm.
And so I'd like for us to do that now while some of these examples are fresh.
Yes.
So that we can say, well, why are we doing this? We do it in a year or two, different board members involved, different
Yes.
people involved, be like, why are we messing with this?
Mhm.
Well, because we had something that didn't go as smoothly as we
Mhm.
would have anticipated. And so whether or not then, instead of on this one, the legal reference, more of it should be in the policy, at least a little bit of it. And clarifying what language are we using, what is, a fixed asset, what is a real estate asset? What is whatever it is that we have that has value.
I think your suggestion about calling it instead of disposal of district property, we call it disposal of different assets and delineating what those are is the clearest way to get after that.
so Chris, you're saying move forward, change the policy.
Yeah,
And I would,
that our decision that we made was based on our previous policy. And in reviewing it, we needed to make sure that the policy was more complete. But otherwise, how else, when would we update this if we don't do it now?
well, I think that, I mean, I absolutely agree about the, things fresh and we've
Mhm.
got the questions and we've got all that figured out. There is a pretty easy way that you can capture that so that when you bring it back, and it would be specific, I would say as soon as this is resolved, I mean, again.
So we could have a draft ready.
Yes, we could.
Well, I mean, that we could go there, have a draft ready when this current scenario.
That's one way to do it,
Mhm.
or you capture all of the nuances that we're talking about right now in a white sheet. So that that is included when you bring this forward again.
Yeah, which is same kind of thing,
And-
white sheet or.
And keep in mind too, OSBA didn't require staff. This wasn't sent down in
Right,
the packet.
right.
This was us inquiring.
Right.
So we can bring it back with what we've learned. We could bring it back in 6 months when this is resolved and have suggested language. And then it would be perceived, you're doing things transparently from what you learned from this incident.
Right.
start next.
From the
year's
outside,
tab.
which I'm almost there,
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
that feels
Yeah.
far more
Yeah,
responsible and responsive, I think.
and I don't think I was suggesting that we would turn around and adopt this at our next board meeting,
Mhm.
because that would look like.
It would look bad.
I was
We
just
wrote it.
clarifying. 'Cause
Yes,
that's-
yeah, no, and that was good because that wasn't what I was thinking of,
Okay.
and so I think we've got clarity.
We can add this to our list. We can put a sentence in, and we'll do it on our, we'll put it in for next fall, or maybe in the spring if this is settled, to bring back. So we'll keep tabs on it and make sure it's done.
And kind of write down some of the notes, that we've had some good notes about
Yeah.
this, so as it's done,
Sarah's been taking the notes. We'll have them.
Particularly about, again, to go back and do the research, which I noted here, but I
Yeah.
won't be at the next meeting.
Mhm.
What did they look at that made them think they should?
Yes.
That's really gonna be key,
Mhm.
because when you change it, that's gonna come up, because that's what the public sees. But they said,
mhm,
and, you know, at some point, we have to figure out what the communication is to the community too.
mhm. And I think. At the very least. Now we have about a 27-hour August retreat. But this feels like something that should go as part of that conversation. I'm not waiting for it to be in the fall.
Well,
Or this spring, I guess this spring.
so putting that preliminarily on the August retreat agenda just means that you don't forget.
Uh-huh.
And it can be moved if it's still not resolved.
Right.
Mhm, yeah,
But
yeah.
it could
So,
I do think it's important for, I mean, we'll do the background work, but it's important to wait until this issue is resolved.
yeah,
Cause there's a lot on the table right now.
yeah,
Mhm.
and so, so clarity in the descriptors, clarity in the use of the
Mhm.
ORS requirements, and clarity in the process.
Mhm.
So those all are things that would make this a better, policy.
Mhm.
So I made a note on our policy spreadsheet. I started a new spreadsheet for next year that just says revisit DN.
Okay,
And then on our board planner for August for the retreat, I put revisit policy DN regarding sale of real estate.
okay. Okay.
Have we clarified next steps for that policy? Any other questions?
Well. So anytime, so when we've had like computers that come to us in a block,
Mhm.
that's come before the. We don't have a lot of vehicles.
It's rare that we have vehicles. We're gonna have some coming up. We're replacing a few.
Okay, so I'm thinking that
Yes.
would be coming to the board,
Mhm.
and, textbooks, we will still have physical textbooks. I know that we have said, as we've done a textbook adoption, we've said that the old ones will go away. I
Yes.
don't recall if that's been a separate, because at some point, the textbooks don't have value.
Right.
Right.
I believe that's been in consent agenda in the past.
Okay, it sounds like it, yeah,
Mhm.
that it has been, that
Yeah.
we're just not, and the only other, I think I had brought this up in our last conversation. And it certainly has more of that in version 2, where it talks about, scrap, junk, or
Mhm.
charitable or educational, keeping that language in
Mhm.
there, because then that gives us the ability to do still of some use Chromebooks to
Mhm.
organizations. But I think also, we have had different people involved in the surplusing of stuff, and not everyone had the same viewpoint of trying to minimize environmental impact.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if you want to put that in policy, but to not just throw them in the landfill.
Right.
If we can help it, if we make sure that we're dealing with someone who is I don't want to say the word reputable, but
Mhm.
someone who's mindful of, we definitely changed from the days of throwing in the
And
dumpster.
we can put language like that, and we do that.
Yeah, we
Not
do
dumpster,
it, but
we do it
again,
environmentally.
exactly, but we do it, however, when people are gone and no longer here, and someone says, well, in our other district, we did it this way.
Mhm.
I want it to at least have it be somewhere in a policy that someone has to look at it and say, oh, that's how we're supposed to do it. So, okay. All right. And these will just finish right away, right? These are
Yes.
easy.
So, the next policy up is criminal records checks and fingerprinting.
Okay,
There, we've run it by HR. There are some things that will true up with this policy that need to be trued up. But otherwise, it seems to be very reasonable and on point.
So our problem was,
Mhm.
and why we brought it back is, we did not like deleting a policy.
Thank you. Oh, the deleting of,
And we said, tell OSBA, we don't like this.
oh,
got you.
We did not want to delete and then
Mhm.
create a new one because that's just
we
problematic. So
lose, we
what was
lose
that?
the.
And I have not, that is something I neglected to do. So I don't have an answer for you on that. I'm gonna have to go back.
But it's
I mean,
the
it
same,
says, we don't like this,
Mhm.
use our policy, current policy.
To
not
update
delete
them.
And new.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whether, I mean, the question is, we want to ask them if we can do that, or do we just do it and say we've updated it, but we didn't do it the way you wanted us to? Because we don't like that. Do we have the ability to just make that happen?
Strictly, I believe we have the ability to make that happen. It goes against their recommendation for a new policy, but I'm not, I mean, I do believe the board has that latitude.
because why I would not want to have it just be deleted is it loses the
All the rest.
history.
So that's why
Yeah.
we made that point.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
is it,
And I get it from theirs, if they didn't do a delete and a new, then there would be in between this thing so much red marking, I get that part, but there's an easier way than just saying that it's
So-
still the same policy, it's not being deleted.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm rethinking why we have to go back to OSBA. We're just going to,
Mhm.
right? Or do we want them to do the work? Is it asking permission, or do we just want to get our money's worth and have them do the work the way we want it to be? What would our options be?
It's having them, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's having them do the work.
Yeah, because if they're saying it's delete, if they're saying it's I hate the word delete, rewrite, then they can still use all of the revision dates. It's still the same policy,
Mhm.
and they can just say new language,
And so that,
replaced or something, but they can do that.
and again, you know, you will say, here's how we're going to do, we want to do your updates, and here's how we want you to do it, so please do that.
Yeah.
If they don't, I guess that's another conversation.
That's, yeah,
Yep, Sarah, will you remind me of this? And I'll get to it next week.
Mhm.
Thank you.
okay.
Disagree. I mean, and again, to Chris's point, I get why it would be so onerous to do. And yet we're a customer paying money, so that's what we want.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you very much.
and we've seen, and instead of delete, what we've seen before is in the policy. Red line everything.
Yeah.
And
And
then
just
new
update it.
language, yeah, so they have a way of doing it, I think someone just got ahead of themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm super straight.
The next policy up, JGAB, is
Yeah.
use of restraint and seclusion. This is the first time we ran into the board. No, I'm kidding.
I believe.
Okay, thank you. So an existing policy with mostly cleanup language, as we talked about the last time we reviewed this.
So, I know we don't do pods.
Yeah.
Why did we cross out the man? Because we just use what, that calls out a specific.
It calls
instead
out
of
a
being able-
specific, yes,
Instead of being able to pick what we
Yeah.
need to use, so man could still be one of the ones.
it could,
There may be other things, we don't have to change the policy every time we
Agreed.
change. training.
yes.
Okay. All right. And. Okay. And is the last paragraph, last sentence, member who violates this policy, is that new in statute or just hasn't been in our policy?
I didn't research that to give you an answer.
I mean,
I-
it seems like a pretty,
It's pretty
Standard.
straightforward
yeah,
sentence.
pretty
and it's-
straightforward. Yeah, I'm not saying we should take it out. I'm
Right.
just surprised it wasn't in it.
Me too.
Well-
Mhm.
And isn't, I mean, the concern about, putting that in here for this policy
Mhm.
implies this policy, but nothing else. That is a standard statement for
Yes,
every staff member in every like
And-
insubordination if you don't
In
follow
all of our
policy.
discipline letters, that same sentence goes in, everything. So to me, it's pretty consistent and I have to take this home.
Okay.
And I think it is more important to be in here is because of the federal and state requirements around restraint and seclusion, that it is. I don't know that every policy we have is subject to dismissal. If they violate it. It may be subject to,
Progressive discipline.
yeah,
Well, that would be something that,
Maybe subject.
I mean, it just. This is just technical, but technically. This and other policies as defined. May be subject to this. It looks like this is the only one. It
Right.
kind of, it makes that implication that this one is worth saying. So,
Mhm.
but. That's just. I thought. Okay. But they don't care.
I see it both ways.
okay, okay. We'll save it for another battle. Are we gonna keep going?
Yeah, are we
John?
good with that?
Okay, yeah.
So that one's moving forward during work session?
And then this next one, the EDCA, same thing that we want OSBA just to redline that they're changing the existing policy and we're adding new language and not calling it delete and proposed.
Yep.
We just want it redlined and then they can just put all the new paragraph.
Let's see. Well, this is another one where we have a whole bunch of overlap.
And that's,
But if
Because
the
I
prim-
think the emergency plan and first aid is actually.
but if they're saying delete it, but we still have one, then it's the same thing. We're just saying redline. And replace it with the new language. Update it with the new language, not replace.
And is this one a little different? Not that I agree with Chris. The premise of don't delete, but is it because they're bringing two into one?
That's what I'm trying to, because then there's the emergency drills one also.
Right?
Um. Which is mostly strikes. Strategy.
But the proposed EBC doesn't have anything, it's not incorporating EBCD. It's cross-referencing into it. No, it's not even
It isn't.
cross-referencing. Mm-mm. So it still seems like it's a straightforward.
It's about procedures, which is part of what's in the emergency drills one.
Well, it's part of the emergency plan. But is, because how does it relate to the emergency
John, we're trying
plan?
to figure out if this proposed and delete is the same situation as the last one, which
Yeah.
is
It's
don't
like all
delete,
those
but
EBBs or the,
Mhm.
like when we had. Last time around, student health services with infection with,
Right, well, the first day of the EBB,
yeah,
whatever. EBBBB.
so first of all, the current to delete is EBC/EBCA. So why does it have two? Is that typical?
It's ones where there's several that are like that, where it'll list it and then EBCA will be listed as EBCA/EBC. Depends on which one somebody looks up.
so then this is an ad.
That's the way the, one that we
Oh,
just
what
did
if
about
this
the,
is the same? It's just
reporting,
worded
mandatory
different.
reporting is
It
listed
is.
that way. Whether or not it's, although that was whether or
The
not.
big
staff or
difference, the
students.
delete one takes out that the board can conduct an executive session to consider matters, which you still can. I mean, that's an acceptable executive session. They just took it out of the new.
And the new one adds the requirements for first aid. Number of staff for first aid.
Yeah,
So-
every 60 students.
I think we tried pushing it.
Pushing it back to OSBA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, so let's define, what do you mean try? We're going to say.
We would
do
like
it
you to
this
do
way.
this.
I think we need to understand if there's a philosophical change
Hmm.
in how they're approaching, how they're doing this, because now I think this is the third one. One of which we kind of dealt with. Two now that we're like, why aren't they just updating our policy? So I think I'm saying, we need to have that
I know.
conversation.
I agree with you,
mhm,
so that if, when we push back, we might understand it and go, okay, but if we don't,
Right,
we're the clients. And
Right.
if they are gonna continue in a way and manner that doesn't work with us, then we'll just
yeah,
opt out of the service.
I think we need to understand
Um,
more about.
on
We do need
the,
to understand more.
on the proposed policy, what Sarah just said, it references on both of the policies, 192.6602K to do an executive session to consider matters of safety plan. It doesn't have a paragraph that calls that out in the proposed EBC. It does still reference the legal ORS, but I think it should be, again, that's another one of those where, am I supposed to look up 25 ORSs to see that we can have an executive session?
Well, and it's struck on the emergency girls one too.
So if the purpose is to and I see their point, if we have language that is an ORS required, but we put the actual language in, when that ORS changes, then you gotta change your policy, which you have to do anyway. So if you just
Does the
reference
ORS change? You mean the actual ORS statement?
when an ORS changes, and we've only referenced it, it means that we're still referencing the policy, even if it changes, we're still referencing that ORS in its
Mhm.
current form or its new
Right,
form.
right.
It means that the policy stays current. So I
Right.
see their point about doing that. However,
Mhm.
to your point, there
Mhm.
has to be a balance between, I'm not gonna read all these ORSs.
Mhm.
So if we, in the language, it feels like there's a way to, in the language, say, call out
Well,
some,
that's what they did on this one.
and now they're taking it out.
And I'd rather put it back, I'm saying I want to put back in because
I'm
it
saying
has an
this-
actionable
I'm
item.
saying the same thing. I'm just gonna try to get to a reason why we would wanna do that. But I think,
Because I said so.
no, my point is that
That's
I
why.
think that there's a way that you can do what they want by referencing the ORS and note the things that we think are important in the policy, which is somehow to say, um, I don't know, the current ORS says this, that we're gonna follow, and you bring it out into the policy like it was
Like
here. Yeah, but if you add something that says we'll always follow current ORS, meaning that if it changes, we're gonna
But
follow. the
that's,
current.
but that's again, that's back to. That's the baseline understanding. If the ORS changes, of course, we're gonna follow it.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
trying
and
to,
so on
trying to
this,
figure out, they're
it's just
trying to
pulling
make it
out.
easy,
Yeah.
and we get to say, we don't like that, we're gonna do it differently.
Yeah, and so I would have it again be that it gives
I
an
agree.
actionable item that's not a usual, it's not a usual and customary event.
Okay.
And so that's where, when it's not something that happens in a routine manner, how do we make sure that it's easily retrievable?
Okay.
Not everybody likes to go look at ORS.
I think that might be an understatement. But
So this one, we're asking OSBA.
why they're doing it the way they're doing it and
And
asking them
making
to do
sure-
it the other way.
And make sure that we include the paragraph about the board being able, according to the ORS, that reference that was on the other one. But that paragraph should be
Executive session.
incorporated. Yeah.
Well, and they may or may not put it in there, we'll just add it back in when it comes back to this.
Yeah, we could, because I think no matter what, it needs to be added.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Is there a separate policy for when we can use the executive session?
I'm sure
Yeah.
There
there,
is,
There's
kind
lots.
of listed,
Yeah,
in
it's
there's an
lots.
executive session policy in that,
Yeah,
that is one of the
About
things
that.
listed.
yeah.
But
It could be,
again,
about-
it's-
I still like having it in there.
Yeah.
but
for
it's when
safety
I'm
reasons.
looking up
Mhm.
emergency procedures and it
Mhm.
says, okay, we can have an executive session to go over things that might be sensitive in nature about emergency response. I'd rather have that there than have it be.
Yep.
It can be cross-referenced, but have it be where I'm looking for it.
Yes.
So
UBCB?
then, yeah, do we still wanna look at emergency girls?
Well, that's a new, I mean, that's just a revision to an existing policy, right?
Yeah, and it really
And
is just clean up.
Did it
language.
work for you guys? That was, I think, the question that we asked. Is it current practice that we're doing?
It is current practice. This is cleanup language. We're
Okay.
running drills every month. We're following statute and that we're varying the drills too, where it used to be just fire drills. Now it's lockdown, secure, other drills are incorporated in.
Okay,
And this just clears it up.
okay. Okay. Yeah, and it
So-
says that under there under safety.
But it
threats.
does, so it does reference the policies that we just said we're gonna put.
It does. do
The
that.
bottom of page one, Seaboard Policy EBCA.
Right,
So is there any concern with moving it forward if that policy is still?
although it's interesting because EBCA. We did not, I mean, it doesn't call itself
It says EBC dash EBCA.
safety threats. And that's not, I think, in EBCA.
EBCA is
EBCA is going
emergency
away,
procedures.
And
Deleted.
disaster
If they're
plans
doing
is
the
deleted.
videos, there's-
Yeah, but
Yeah.
even going back to what you're saying, safety threats is a new policy. And how we deal with those, that was what we went through the 2 meetings ago or a meeting
Okay.
ago.
And is that,
And that's related, that new RS, remember we went through the whole 24 hour question with
right,
Spencer.
right.
We added
Okay,
language to that,
okay,
so
And
that,
it's EBCA,
so they. Okay,
but that means
so when the one they're deleting, that was partly they were deleting and they pulled out and made it two separate.
okay, so they're gonna delete EBCA. And we've created a new EBCA called safety threats. There's some confusion here.
No, yeah.
yes, sir.
See what I mean? They're suggesting to delete
Yeah.
EBCA
Right,
and we,
yeah,
in
yeah,
October, we created
Right.
EBCA safety threats.
right.
Huh?
Because then we made it separate.
So they
Where-
didn't,
So
they
when,
didn't delete EBCA, they just changed it.
Well, they
Well, they
deleted our
deleted-
current slash
Yeah.
one.
they took out the combined one
So
and
they
made it
can't
two
use it
separate. So,
EBCA.
so they did EBC and they pulling this one out and making it EBCA. So we've got EBC, EBCA and EBCB.
Back to Tracy's point, we need to meet with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just find out what's kind of their,
What's going on?
What is
Yeah.
happening?
yeah, okay.
You're confusing me.
So other than that part, was there anything else in that emergency drill one that,
This was.
No, it's pretty straightforward. This is what we do. It follows current practice. So from a operation standpoint, not concerned.
so they also struck out though, that last sentence on the second page. Well, the red line, that we can use it to conduct an executive session, consider matters, explain to the emergency drill.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that,
Yeah, only because we just asked that in the last one, so I kind
which
of.
I'd recommend keeping that.
I'd like to keep that in.
And then it's clear to the public too, that we can't always talk about all the safety things you want.
Right,
Uh,
and that we do have the right to have an executive session on certain aspects.
Yep. oh my goodness.
Okay,
So. Are we clear? We had talked in our planning meeting about. Adding a work session before the January meeting because we thought we were gonna have a bunch of policies. Most of our policies, except two, are needing more work. So I think my question is it worth adding a work session for these two policies, or do we just add two policies onto the January 22nd work
yeah,
session?
let's do that.
And then
I think
we've
it's pretty
alleviated that extra
Yeah.
meeting for people.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Let me have an opinion.
There aren't.
Would you like us to add 3 more meetings? just
No,
for
but
the
January
file?
22nd, so January 22nd is the date that is supposedly scheduled right now for final interviews for superintendent search.
We'll see, we're gonna meet with
So I don't know if
HYA,
Paul is
so,
going to go on January 22nd.
Don't
We have a
But-
whole bunch of stuff on January 22nd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we may need to
But
look
to their
at.
point, we won't be able to solve this till you meet with HYA.
and we're doing
figure
that
out
in,
December 18.
we're doing
5
that
minutes,
5
8
minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, in 5 minutes, okay,
They're coming to meet us.
okay.
So no added work session. We're not moving, EBCB is not moving forward yet because we need to ask. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep,
All three other
of us.
policies we had a question about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, reference policy and we wanna keep in the,
Yeah, I got the executive session.
okay.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you.
Good luck with your next meeting.
Cross off one more meeting, Kathy. for the policy meetings.
Yeah. Did you guys have a